Dear NCAA Basketball, Adapt or Die. This is episode 14 of the Royal City Hoops podcast. I am Bill, and we are going to review how the NCAA let the internet burn its house down. Earlier this week, Daishawn Nix decommitted from UCLA to sign the G League Professional Pathway contract, a select program that they've built. And really, this is the kind of final nail in the coffin, I think, for the NCAA as we know it. Now, he is the third Preps to Pros player to do this. Isaiah Todd decommitted from Juwan Howard and the University of Michigan, and Jalen Green signed a deal who is potentially the number one pick in the NBA draft. Now, that's a big deal. These kids decided to commit to a developmental program. Now, they aren't going to be playing games in the G League on a G League team. They're still really young. The NBA has created this program to kind of shepherd their elite players through. And this is a big change in the basketball landscape. And the word pathway is really important. We're going to hit on that really hard. But we're going to talk a little bit about the internet burned down the NCAA basketball house. Now, we also had last year, we had LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton heading over to Australia for their Next Stars program and bypassing college. And just to say, as a statement of how successful that program was, LaMelo Ball, different Ball brothers, I get confused. They're all tall and skinny. LaMelo Ball bought his team. Let that sink in for a minute. A high school, quote-unquote high school, athlete bought his professional team. If that isn't an endorsement of that program, I don't know what is. Because it's an incredible pathway. And we're going to talk again, pathways, the different ways to get to the NBA. But this all started in 2008 when Brandon Jennings decided he was going to go to Italy instead of Arizona. And that's when the match was lit. The fire didn't really pick up, but it was kind of simmering from that point on. He stepped away. He took a year off because the NCAA had changed its age limit to 19. So you could no longer jump from high school to the NBA. So instead of going to the NCAA, he said, hey, I'm going to go make some money in Italy and then be ready for the draft. He started something very slowly. I mean, Emmanuel Mudiay did it a bit later. Jeremy something or other did it. He went to Japan, I think. There's been a little bit of this going on. Darius Baisley last year or 2 years ago just decided, I'm just going to sit the year out and train. He didn't go to Syracuse where he was supposed to go. So we've kind of seen this coming. The NCAA should have seen this coming. For decades, the NCAA was the only real pathway to the NBA. And they leveraged their power against their quote-unquote student athletes for decades. Now, originally, you didn't see players leaving till their junior or senior year. The only other pathway, the first pathway to really start to be outside the NCAA was in the 80s when European players started to get drafted. I think it was 86 when Arvydas Sabonis and Drazen Petrovic were drafted. And that was kind of the beginning of you seeing, oh, this guy's really good. There were some European players that came over and got drafted, but they went to American colleges first. Detlef Schrempf is the one that sticks out to me when you look at a name of list. He was part of that incredible 84 draft, but he went to Washington, University of Washington, before he was drafted. So when Brandon Jennings went over, the motivation was to make some money, to develop as a player, and not be part of the American system. The NCAA should have known that this day was coming, that they were no longer going to be the big cheeses. We saw a few years ago Ed O'Bannon sue them because they were using his likeness for all this video games and merchandising. Jalen Rose has talked a ton about it. that this is a business, that these kids in the system are making millions and millions of dollars for these schools, and they get a quote unquote free education, when really a lot of them just want to play ball. The side effect, yes, is getting the education, but committing to their craft is what they want to do. And where the NCAA really lost its footing, where they stopped to realize what was going on, was not understanding that players no longer need the NCAA to build their brand. Social media and their cell phone is how they can build their brand. YouTube, Instagram, Overtime, House of Highlights. These things are ubiquitous now. I'm pretty sure I can use that word. I don't necessarily know the total definition of it, but it sounds really smart. It changed everything. These kids don't need colleges to be incredibly popular. You know, there's a guy named Julian Newman who, the kid's like 5'6", and he's become an internet phenom. Tristan Jass. There's a ton of names that you don't need to be an NBA player to make a brand. But think if you were Jalen Green, Zion Williamson exploded on Instagram. All these accounts, we'll call them, they're not websites, I guess that shows my age, have supplanted the need for teams to go scout a player at an NCAA game, right? NBA teams are not allowed to go scout high school players, but all their games are streamed on the internet. You don't need a TV crew there. You need some kid with a digital camera. I mean, the one I'm using is only $800. Some kid spends $2,000. He can make a living going around shooting footage in gyms. You don't need a lot. So I think what made the NCAA obsolete was the evolution of the internet. It just makes me think that the NCAA was asleep at the wheel. Like they're sitting in their living room watching Dick Vitale commentary as the house burns down around them. Sure, they've made some concessions of late, but what were they going to do? These kids are brands. You can't have a kid who can have his own merch deal. Like he can drop ship his own brand wherever he goes. Julian Newman, Prodigy, they've got a whole list of stuff. They don't need the NCAA to make money. How is the NCAA going to police that? Oh, you can't wear your own brand that you developed on your own, independent of everybody, with no support, with no infrastructure. You can't use that while they are getting $1 million shoe deals. The leverage has totally changed. And we'll use the term player empowerment here. High school kids, and LeBron James, again, he's the poster child or poster man or whatever you want to call it for player empowerment era. You know, when he formed the Heatles with the decision and all of that, everything kind of changed. Players realized like, whoa, I'm not just a commodity. I can control my destiny and I can tell my own story with a YouTube channel. Case in point, what I'm doing. They can do whatever they want without needing they can just make their own platform is what I'm trying to say. And players before them shared their experience and shared how to do this and saying, hey, no, you don't need to do what they tell you. You can control your destiny. And the NCAA did not adapt to that. Indianapolis, where the NCAA is centered, they just sat back and said, we're going to stick to what we're doing. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see new pathways emerge, right? We talked about the G League pathway. And a lot of these kids, let's go back a second. A lot of these kids come from underprivileged financial backgrounds. And do any of us really believe that colleges are not paying these kids money to go there? Sure. But these development programs have come along and now they're paying real money. RJ Hampton's deal with the Australian Basketball League for the Next Stars program, and I think he's playing in Melbourne, is for $500,000. Plus, Lee Nang signed him to a 5-year multi-million-dollar shoe deal. What do you think the University of North Carolina is offering? Anywhere close to that? No. And if you want to take care of your family, it only makes sense to go do that. If you want to be a carpenter, I'm a renovation contractor. You want to be a carpenter? You can go apprentice. and go be a carpenter. At 18, you can say, I want to be a professional basketball player and go apprentice somewhere. And I think this is what these programs are. They're just apprenticeships. They're grooming these kids to be part of the NBA system. And the NBA wants that. They don't want the failure of the high school kids getting drafted that they had in the past, because that's a bad PR move. Now they can get kids into their system. Now, granted, this isn't going to be, they're not taking 100 kids. These are going to be a select few of elite players. Now, if you want to know more about this, I highly recommend Woj did a podcast with Jonathan Gavoni on this, I think just before Deshaun Nix signed. It's highly educational and very interesting. I highly recommend you listen to that once you've done with this one, I hope. These kids have a pathway to go make money and build their craft and learn and grow and not be part of sort of the, did Draymond Green call it the slave master mentality? I mean, most of the student athletes are African American. How many people in the NCAA head office are African American? Has the NCAA ever had a head that's not white? So this is about money, and these kids need money. They deserve it. They deserve proper value. Do you think Zion got proper return for the year he spent at Duke? For what Duke made for him him being there? Not a chance. So the advisors to these kids as well, because they're not your regular 18-year-old kids. They have people around them, grooming them, growing them, the sneaker companies, all of this. This is not this innocent kid in a gym, nobody around him. I mean, just watch the clips of the AAU tournaments. It's a machine. We're talking about a machine, and the scandal we had earlier with DeAndre Ayton and Adidas and Nike. Imagine what we're going to hear once the NCAA falls from its pedestal. Once these programs become real. Australia's program, big success. The NBA said, hey, why aren't we doing that? So the NBA G League program, the Pathway program, originally started, I think, a year ago, and it was offering $125,000. In the Woj Pod, they talk about, we know kids are getting paid money by these colleges. They can stay home and get money close to that and go to college, not the G League. Well, the G League saw what the NBL Next Stars program did and said, well, we need to up our game. We need to pay more. So Jalen Green has a $500,000 contract. I think he's got another $500,000 in incentives, and he can sign endorsement deals. So if I'm one of those guys, why would I go to college? Next, you're going to see other European pro leagues see what the Australian League did and see what the NBA did and say, we can create our own program to bring over NBA talent and build our PR machine. Because the Europeans have been having kids play pro basketball forever. Luka Doncic started playing for Real Madrid senior team at 16. Ricky Rubio was on the Spanish national team at 14, I think. So this isn't new. This is new to North America. And I think the whole system that we had is really ignorant. Even here in Canada where I am, I've always believed we should move to a club system and associate, if you really want to associate a club system with a university, great. But don't make it that those kids have to be students, because I played at a Canadian university for a year. And to put context in it, imagine it's kind of like playing at a Division II NCAA school. The talent level and all that. There were guys on my team, they weren't there to go to school. Every term, staying eligible was difficult because they just weren't going to class. They didn't care. I mean, there's tons of stories like that. I'm not making this up. This isn't a critique of that. It's just the reality. They wanted to play ball. Education was just a side effect. And so the change in the system is really going to affect the NCAA. And I don't think they really realize that the game is done. They're not going to have a season next year. Right? I mean, or they may not. I shouldn't guarantee that. They've already canceled one season. We're talking about There not being any fans at events potentially for 2 years. We're talking about the NBA. Just yesterday came out this whole bubble phenomenon of them quarantining everybody at Disneyland or in Vegas so that they could finish the season. And I'm going to think that this might be an option for next season as well, especially if we're not playing with fans. And the contagion possibility of players being in, you can't really play an NBA game and social distance at the same time. Doesn't make sense. So we're entering into very interesting times for the NCAA, because if they don't have a season and these kids they start to realize like, oh, I'm not getting what I deserve from the NCAA. And why am I going to go anyways? What am I getting out of this? I'm going to go to college for 1 year. Now, do I think the NCAA disappears? No. But the house is burned down. They're just going to rebuild it and probably just be in a smaller house. There's still going to be a pathway to the NBA, just not for the super elite kids. And there's still going to be tons of fans. I mean, March Madness isn't going to go away. If anything, this might truly give the NCAA an opportunity to be amateur athletics instead of student athletes. They might actually be student athletes, the majority of them, and rightfully so. But again, we talked about it in another episode that players develop in different ways. We're trying to talk about Steve Nash and Kawhi Leonard. They went to college and they weren't these elite prospects when they arrived. Paul George is another one. They went to small schools, they grew, they developed, they suddenly became these players along that path. So the NCAA isn't going to disappear. It's just going to be different. The tournament is amazing. It's the best tournament in the world, in my opinion. I mean, how many people skip work just to watch the tournament? Tons of us. So, which is terrible because I work for myself. But anyhow, the NCAA is not going anywhere. It's just going to be different. It'll still be a pathway to the NBA. It just won't be the only one. You're going to see more of these programs, these professional pathway programs pop up like the Next Stars, like the G League one in other countries. You're going to have more kids go, well, maybe I can't go to the G League one, but I can go to the Australian one, or I can go to the one in Europe. One of the reasons the Australian one was so successful was that there wasn't such a big, huge cultural difference for kids going over there. When Brandon Jennings went to Italy and Emmanuel Mudiay went to China, that's like a big cultural change. Language, norms, restaurants, food, living arrangements, just the people around you, they're different. Australia, it's not that different from the US. I've been there. I would think if they're looking for that, England would be another one that could possibly build up. Their basketball league isn't that great, and this would be a way for them to build that up. I mean, we live in Canada. Could we? Well, basketball fails here epically as a pro league, just for geographic and reasons. But anyhow, that's another tangent. You're going to see more of these pathway leagues come around. The NCAA going to disappear? No. But they should have seen this coming, and they didn't adapt. And they're going to die to be rebuilt as something else. That's all we got for today's episode. I hope that made sense. I tried to write more of this out. The last episode, there was more of a script. This one, there was more of a script, but I couldn't print it to have it next to me because I'm not technologically savvy. It looks like we're not going to have basketball for a while. I mean, I went through and I ordered a new pair of basketball shoes online because they were on sale. But who knows when I'm going to get to use them. That was both a highlight and a low light when they showed up. I was like, what a deal. I got the Steph Curry 7s. This is going to be awesome. And then my wife kind of said, yeah, you're probably not going to have a league for a while. And I just thought, why you got to kill my buzz like that? Can't you just support me? Isn't that what marriage is about? But I digress. So, like if you like, comment if you have something to say. Subscribe at your own risk. And I'm sorry for being late on this one. I said I was going to try to do these on Friday, but life kind of got in the way yesterday. I will see you next Friday.